Hello, welcome to Teddy Bikes Cape. So for today I have a bike project. This is the Ross Mount Hood. I have a video that I put out probably like 2 months ago where I worked on this bike. Just basically, getting it tuned up really quick just to ride it. Well, in this video, I'm gonna take this bike completely apart, strip it down, clean up everything, and then reassemble it back together. Not really do many upgrades, but although I'll do a couple, but mostly just put it back together and get it back in service for hopefully another 30 years or more. The condition of this bike is interesting in that it's pretty scratched up on the frame, but overall there's very little rust on this bike, which is kind of unusual for New England. I mean, there's rust on it, but it's not like caked on rust. It obviously hasn't been stored at the beach or anything like that, stored out in the rain or anything. So it's been somewhat taken care of. And I've already cleaned this bike up already. This isn't straight from whenever I got it. You can see the previous video. I'll put a link to it so that you could check it out if you're interested. So I've done a little bit with this bike already, but for the most part, it's been used quite a lot. But it had original tires on it, Ross tires. So I guess maybe it didn't get used that much after all. But it's definitely seen a lot of storage wear. I guess that'd be the best way of describing it. And so again, I'm going to take this bike apart and try to make it a little bit nicer than it is now, and put fresh lubrication on it, and we'll see what results turn out to be. So the Ross Mount Hood was made in Allentown, Pennsylvania, the frame at least. It's got lots of Japanese parts on it, and it's a relatively inexpensively made frame. It has like stamped dropouts, and it doesn't even have a proper rear derailleur dropout on it. So it's not like any kind of high-end type of frame, but it's a good serviceable bike. Obviously it's held up over many years, and you can see here I'm just like showing the brakes in operation and then showing the shifting, and that indeed the bike is in operating condition already. The tires are pretty cracked up, so those obviously would need to be changed, but otherwise I probably wouldn't have any problem riding this bike for a significant distance with some fresh tires on it. And you can see here the chain itself was actually in pretty good shape. So here I'm just labeling some of the cables, because I'm going to use the outer cables and just replace the inner cables. My rationale with the outer cable housings is they've lasted this long and they seem to be working pretty well with just some lubrication on the old cables. I put some fresh inner cables, and I think they'll be perfectly fine with proper lubrication for another 40 years. But I mean, that's just my opinion. This isn't a high-end race bike or anything like that. It's just a bike for someone to use every day. The condition of these brake blocks, you can see, they look pretty fresh. So in my opinion, this bike really didn't see too much actual riding. I think it was primarily storage wear, as I mentioned before. The cantilever brakes and the levers are both Diacom, just the old school mountain bike type components that I think they just last forever. They're just really solid units. There's not really any kind of plastic components like in some of the brakes that snap and crack, and especially like some of the old Shimano cantilevers. These are just all metal construction essentially, except for the actual brake pad surface themselves, which obviously those are replaceable. I think sometimes you just have to appreciate whenever things were made to last, and I think these type of components definitely maybe they didn't have that in mind when they were making them, but they certainly achieved that lasting quality, as they say. So the derailleurs are both Suntour components, and those two are like really, they're not precision by any means. And if you ride the bike, you can definitely tell it's a little bit of a clunky shifting type of configuration. But the components themselves are all metal construction pretty much, and I think they'll last a really long time. I'm not really sure I'm taking this bike apart in the most efficient manner. I kind of was thinking a lot about the filming versus like actually doing the job, and if you've done this before, you'll understand what I mean. But sometimes you think more about the shots than you do about actually doing the work on the bike. And in this case, I think I would have been better off doing this another manner. But it is what it is. And so here, getting off the grips, I'm just using IPA shoved in through a pipette, and that loosens up the grip so that I can pull them off. Because this is an old bike, I use a little bit of tri-flow on some of these components, just in case they're kind of frozen up. I don't want to snap any fasteners, and I think if you saw one of my previous videos, I had a fastener break, and so I'm just being extra cautious with these, so that these are hard to replace components. This combined handlebar stem is a Nitto. I wasn't sure, but whenever I did pull it off, I did find that it was made by Nitto. And so there's a lot of cool parts on it. I mean, these handlebars are probably worth more than the rest of the bike, to be honest. So the front wheels had these kind of security devices on there so that the front wheels don't come off, and did not have quick releases. And that's one of the upgrades I'm going to do on this bike, is I'm going to put quick releases on both the front and the rear. Bearings are in pretty good shape. Lubrication's not bad. I spray a little penetrant in on the cranks beforehand to clear the threads. Plus, I find that these caps like to stick, and a little penetrant seems to like free them up so that I don't have to put too much force on those plastic caps. And whenever I put my tool in, the tool will thread in a lot smoother. So here's a situation where I didn't have the bike really clamped up tight enough to put serious force on it, and this is probably the place where I put the most force on the frame itself. as I start getting the components around the bottom bracket apart, you can see places I really wasn't able to clean in that previous video. And I guess that's one of the advantages of taking a bike completely apart, is you can really get to those places that are kind of hard to get to with all the components in place. I don't have a tool for this particular type of bottom bracket, and so I'm just kind of improvising here with a screwdriver. And generally I think the lock ring is generally the one you have to use the most force for, and generally these cups are really not in there too strongly. So I'm going to leave the fixed cup in place. If you read Sheldon Brown, his recommendation is to not pull it out. And honestly, you think about it, there isn't a lot of argument for it. It's easy enough to clean it out in place the way it is. So this is something that if you were taking this bike out on the road and you got a flat and you happen to have a wrench around, you wouldn't have had very much luck with this particular one because it's just turning around. You ended up having to use a backing wrench in here to actually get that off. I imagine this bike hasn't had a rear wheel off in quite a long time, I guess. So now we've got the bike completely stripped down as far as I'm going to strip it. Again, I'm not going to take the headset cups out, and I'm not going to take out the fixed cup as well in the bottom bracket. So I've got plenty of room to get in and clean the frame as much as I need to from this point on. And I'm just showing some shots of it so that you can get an idea of what I'm starting with. You can see in some of these places on the chain stays, it's pretty rough. And also the seat stays have some places that are rough as well. And I'm going to go through and show you how I try to address this. I think I turned out with a better product than what I started with, but certainly without a respray, it's really hard to make it perfect. But I think in the end, this type of bike, if you were to refinish it, I mean, I don't know if it's really worth the time. And I kind of like some of the patina myself in this type of bike. I don't really want to see a brand new bike necessarily with this. So my first step is I'm just going to use some simple green degreaser and just go over the bike and do a little scrubbing on it, try to free up some of the loose dirt and get that out of the way first of all. So there's some patches on the bike where the rust is fairly extensive and it's kind of covering the paint, and so it actually looks worse than it really is. And so I'm using some fine steel wool to pull off that. I'm being very delicate with it to pull off that corrosion product, just the iron oxide that's formed on the paint. And then I'm going to go over this with a compound and try to polish it back out. And this is another example of another area that had a lot of rust that was over the paint. I didn't do this treatment for the whole frame. I'm just going over these really bad spots that I noticed in the frame. The black is pretty good at hiding a lot of the damage, and one of my secret weapons for treating black frames like this is to use rust converter, which is what this white material is, and it ends up turning the corrosion a black color, and so it'll look a little bit better than what it did. And then once that's dried, I'll actually polish over that, and you end up with something that looks a little better than what you started, what it was before. It's by no means perfect, but it certainly does hide it to a certain extent. I'm using two Meguiar's compounds in this. One of them is called a heavy cut cleaner, which is an older product. They probably still make it. I think it's like number 4 on their scale, which is, it's fairly coarse. And then the other is, I think it's called the squirrel remover or scratch remover, and it's, you know, much more fine, which is really just a fine polish to get rid of any of the scratches that were left by the heavy cut compound. In here, I'm trying some different things to try to, you know, polish these tubes. And here I'm using just some fine steel wool here to remove some of the pitting on the cup here. And here I'm just using a wire brush to clean out these threads on the steer tube, and also cleaning out this inner race with some fine steel wool. This is a Tongay fork. Is what it's stamped on it. So to clean up the components, I'm just using mineral spirits, the low volatility version. Really doesn't have a lot of scent to it at all. And yeah, I just get my hands in here and doing it this way. I probably should use gloves, but I didn't. You know, just using a brush to kind of brush away any of the old dried up grease. Again, a lot of this stuff wasn't really too bad, the lubrication, but I think obviously I think it needed it after 40 years of use. This side looks better. Yes. These are a little rough. So I end up replacing that one bearing. Here I'm just using a brass brush to clean up some of this chrome. It works pretty well at it. I also clean up the thread surfaces as well, just so it'll screw in nice and smoothly. So unfortunately, these bars were pretty pitted up. I did some polishing on them in the previous video, but not really a lot. And obviously, it's a little easier to do more extensive cleaning with it off the bike. And so I use some fine steel wool and then a brass brush to clean up the pitting. I don't get them perfect, but I get them much better than what I started with. So also cleaning up the derailleurs in a similar manner. I end up going over these with some Tri-Flow to all the pivot points after I do the cleaning, which I don't show in the video. And I might be going a little overboard on the seat post, but just kind of cleaning all this up, stuff that you probably never see. But I don't polish it per se. I'm just trying to get off any of the loose crud on it. Really, the way I think about it is I don't really want to polish it too much, because then any scratches are going to show on it real easily. I just want to make it so it doesn't look like it's junky looking, like it's been abused. And I don't bother to take the chain ring apart either. I just clean it as much as I can on the bike. As soon as you end up using it for a week, it's going to be just as dirty, in my opinion. So I'm just doing it my way, and that's my way is just to generally leave them together and just clean them that way. And yeah, just cleaning the chain as well, because I am going to reuse the chain. And now I'm moving on to cleaning some more of the superficial type of surfaces that are on the shifters and some of the other components on the bike. So for taking tires off, what you really want to do is get as much of the air out of the tire as possible before you start, and then you go around the rim and loosen up the bead off the rim, and that'll allow it to sink in at the lowest point so that you can peel off the tires. Generally, I find most of the problems I have are when I don't take enough air out of it or break the bead off of it. So those are my tips. As I mentioned, I'm going to replace the axles in these wheels, and going to use hollow axles, and then use quick releases. So these axles I got from Amazon. I had some left over for the front, since I do most of the bikes that I end up converting. Only the rear needs to be converted, so I end up with several of these front axles. But this bike didn't. I actually used one, and so they're pretty straightforward because they're already cut to the right length. The back ones are generally too long though, and then you have to do a cut, and I'll show that later. And so I'm just cleaning out the hub and the components, and then I'll transfer the old component, the old nuts and spacers and cones over to the new wheel and the new axle. Assembling the components on the axle is pretty straightforward for the front wheel. You just really need to get it centered, and so you have to kind of go back and forth a little bit in the end to get the exposed axle area about the same on both ends, and then kind of tighten it down. It's just an iterative process, and just take your time, and with experience you'll get to do it pretty quickly. So I tighten down the one side, and then I do the adjustment on the other side, and then do the final tighten down. Now we're on to the back wheel, which ends up being a little bit more work, as I'll show you later. Oh, wow. That was easy. So now I'm going to clean the freewheel, and I'm going to be really careful not to use a lot of the mineral spirits, and try not to get it inside. These really are not serviceable, at least not reasonably serviceable. And so what I do is try to add just mostly to the outside to try to get schmeg off the actual cogs themselves. And then I'm going to use some float in there to kind of freshen up some of the old grease that's in there and lubricate it a little bit more. And so what I do is I kind of am applying the oil like right at the interface where the parts come apart, and then I just kind of spin it around, and the centrifugal motion kind of draws it into the bearings. So now we're on to the headset, and there's really not a lot to say about putting the headset together. You just have to make sure you get it tightened up enough, but not too much. So now we're moving on to the bottom bracket, and here I'm just doing a little pre-lube, getting everything lubricated before I go over to the bike, and I'll just carry everything over on the plate and put it right in the bike. Typically the long spindle is the one that actually goes through on the drive side, that extends out through the fixed cup, and that's what this one was. Always make note of that if you can when you're taking a bike apart. So here we're improvising a little bit here. I don't have the correct tool to hold the cup, and so I'm just using a screwdriver to do the best I can. And you just do this until you get the right feel to it. And this probably was that probably wasn't my first run at it. I just didn't want to show a bunch of video of me fooling around. So I got the rear axle in, so I can finish up the rear wheel. So this is my setup for cutting the axle. Got a couple nuts here just to hold the axle in place to the vise. And then I've got the slot that I've created here so that I can put my saw right in between here and get a nice clean cut. So now that we've got this axle cut, we're going to transfer the hardware from the original axle. I'm not going to use the hardware that it came with. I think this is a little bit better quality. And it'll be like an iterative process of getting the spacing of this correct. But you do play around with it a little bit with it on the wheel, and eventually you'll get the correct dimensions. And I'll retain all these spacers and everything. If I find I have to do changes, I will, but I don't think I will. I'm keeping the 5-speed rear cog in place. So chances are we'll need something about like that, but we'll play around with it. Pop this in. So obviously we got quite a bit left over on this side, so we're just gonna do the process of just kind of moving things across. I think I want more on the drive side because it's thicker over on that side, because of the claw on the rear derailleur. Again, probably just going to get this pretty close and lock it down here by locking down the drive side. Then on this side I'm going to adjust the bearing. Maybe a little too tight. A little tight, but I think it's pretty good actually. Yeah. I'm gonna live with that. So if we put it on the bike and it looks like it's not quite fitting right, then we'll make some adjustments. But I think otherwise, I think this job is done. So now move on to installing the crank. And so it's a 14 millimeter nut that tightens them on. Pretty simple. So moving on to the rear derailleur, and again this is that has the claw style, and that just really is just a screw and that's clamped in from the back. And then the front derailleur, I'm just going to position it. I can see where it was on the frame based on where the wear marks are. I kept the front and rear brakes in separate bags, and so it should all be adjusted into the correct place. I don't have to really go through that whole thing, but I will check them to make sure that they're hitting the rims correctly. Good to add a little lubrication for the stem as it goes in, so that nothing gets corroded. All of this is all fairly straightforward, even simpler because it's a one-piece stem and handlebar. And I'm just putting these components on in rough fashion to get them approximately where they're going to go, and then I'll make final adjustments with the bike on the ground and me sitting on the seat. I can get a better idea of where they really should be. And again, I use the isopropyl alcohol, which works really well with the grips off. You just cover up the little end hole and dribble in a few drops of IPA, shake it a little bit, and then pop them right on. And again, grease for the seat post. Seat posts being stuck are probably the leading cause of good frames getting thrown out, because you can't get the seat post out. So back to the wheels, I'm just doing a little cleanup of the spokes. I'm not trying to polish these. There's kind of like a matte, looks like kind of like an oxidized zinc coating, probably the galvanized coating that's just oxidized. I'm not trying to remove that because it would be a lot of work to do that, but there are some kind of dirty spots on there, and so I'm kind of just lightly removing some of that dirt off the spokes, but I'm not doing a full polish or anything like that, because that's just a lot of work, and it's really hard to actually get it fully polished, and so it looks kind of funny if you try to overdo it. And then again, I get the rim surfaces themselves, and then gonna grease up and put the freewheel back on. Fairly simple. Again, put the grease on so that the next person that has to take this off will hopefully have an easy experience as what I had getting this one off. And just putting some tires that are used tires, and I think these are fairly old tires. I had some newer Kendas that were just, the knobby pattern was just a little too aggressive, so I ended up using these older ones. They're in pretty good shape. The sidewalls are a little chalky, but they're not too bad, and they actually look just like the ones that were on this bike, so I thought they fit pretty well. And so now I put the wheels on the bike, and generally you have to really adjust the wheels again once you have it on the ground by just kind of putting them on there rough to do some of the other operations before finally dropping the bike onto the ground. And with the wheels on it now, it's really starting to look like a bike. And so now I'm threading the old chain back on. Pretty straightforward. And now moving on to the cables, and so here I'm putting in, there's like a little mid-cable outer housing on this bike, and then there's one in the rear like most bikes have, and then one for the front derailleur, and then these are for the shifters. And so I use a little bit of tri-flow on the cables in between the fingers and try to spread it evenly along the cable length. Help with corrosion resistance, and also just to reduce the friction inside the cable housing. And I find that works pretty well. You get nice crisp shifting and crisp brakes too when you use it on the brakes. So here I'm doing the front derailleurs, and tell me if you can see the problem I have when I'm doing this. And now moving on to the brakes, and I believe I only showed the front brakes overall because I had some footage problems on doing the rears, mostly just being in the way. Again, this is fairly straightforward. I use a strap, and you can see that I don't quite get it tight enough onto the brakes whenever I finally assemble it, and I end up so this is kind of a way of getting a rough a rough estimate of where it needs to be, and then you can unstrap it and then just take up a little bit of slack, and that's what I end up doing here. Yeah, so again, I loosen that up and then slide the cable down a little bit more to tighten it up a little bit, and then tighten it back up, and then everything's adjusted pretty well. And then the last step is to put on pedals, and then we'll be ready for a test ride. So here's the final product after doing our cleanup and full lubrication service, and I think it turned out pretty well. I mean, it's not a pristine bike by any stretch, but I think it turned out pretty well. It's definitely a crude bike from, as a lot of bikes from that era are. They're not quite as precise, and I certainly admit that having only the 5-speed in the back, there's definitely a bit of space between gears relative to even having a 7-speed in the back. So I guess if I was going to ride this bike every day, I would consider trying to figure out a way to put a 7-speed on. Certainly a 6-speed would be pretty easy, but anyway, it still rides pretty nice. And so, yeah, I think it was a successful operation. And I'm not going to show a lot of riding footage because this video is already getting pretty long. So if you like the video, please like, and if you enjoy this type of content, please subscribe, and I appreciate you for watching it, and we'll see you at the next video. Bye.